So smart conflict is performance enhancing conflict. Okay. So think of it as sort of strategic conflict. And a smart conflict culture is one where people are intentionally engaging in goal and task focused collaborative disagreement in order to identify opportunities, to solve problems, and also to drive performance both in individuals and teams and then, in the organization overall. So we really think of it as a direct line to growth at all three of those kind of levels. Its core characteristics are like open, clear, non-judgmental, and importantly, just-in-time communication with like a curiosity-first mindset. I think there's a couple of really useful things that we get from things like the Thomas Kilmann model and the 5Cs. So the first piece is a bit of an understanding of like theoretically what are the different approaches that people might take in a conflict, which I think, is a useful kind of grounding, but it's not a very practical kind of how-to guide of okay, so what should I do in what context? And also, how do I actually do that? So I think implementation is definitely not kind of at the forefront in that model. And the 5Cs also, I think a lot of my clients would read the 5Cs. I mean, if we just take like, even demonstrating curiosity as one of those kind of Cs, well, it's much easier said than done for a lot of people. So what we've tried to do in Smart Conflict is we've introduced the 5R model, and our 5R model absolutely builds on the rigor and the thinking in those existing models, but it's a how-to highly practical guide that gives you ideas for the phrases and everything to do at each moment that will actually enable you to be curious or to show up collaboratively, because most people don't actually know how to do that. And the other thing we've done with the 5Rs is we've complete the full conflict cycle. Okay, so the 5Rs are reflect, which is definitely what you could start to use something like the Kilmann model to initiate that with. Reflect, regulate, readiness, so the strategy. So the 5Cs is one version of a strategy you could think of in terms of structuring a conversation. Response, what do I do in the moment when X, Y, or Z happens? So that's not really covered previously. And then the fifth one, repair, the critical thing of what are the actions we should be taking after we've been on the receiving end or we've proactively had a hard conversation. The context right now and the landscape is complex, and it's probably more complex than it's ever been in terms of how should we be approaching conflict, what are the messages that we're receiving, and what are the sort of intergenerational differences in terms of expectations and comfort levels with different types of conversation. So what we are absolutely seeing across the board in and out of work is sort of the extremes. So we're seeing much more avoidance because there's much more fear around getting it wrong and not really understanding what good or right even looks like. And then, of course, what we see, particularly kind of in the online space and in sort of the wider political space, is much more aggression, division, and fear mongering. And that is translating into how we're operating in our teams at work, because it's making us want to find our tribes, fit in, and keep our head below the parapet. And we're seeing daily played out in the press the risks of speaking up, of being cancelled. When we look at engineering and tech in particular, it won't surprise you that they're not immune to these kind of challenges. And I suppose there's a couple of things that make them probably particularly operate at the two extremes of avoiding having the conversations altogether. So that would be things like it's going to be heightened in more logical cultures where potentially there's less face-to-face time than in some organizations. And maybe we struggle a bit more to express our kind of nuanced thoughts and feelings. And also a lot of magical thinking that if I just don't say anything, it'll kind of resolve itself. And we always talk about time doesn't heal, it hardens. I definitely see in the tech clients that we work with quite a lot of magical thinking. And then, of course, at the other end of the extreme, we've got all that resentment building up, all those conversations that are not being had that can lead to some, quite difficult eruptions and emotions kind of bubbling over. So then you kind of get these two extremes. So nobody, no matter the sector, is doing a very good job at operating between the extremes and finding those other alternative middle ground ways of engaging in debate and disagreement. And to some extent, it's exacerbated in tech and engineering. Healthy conflict is task conflict, which means it's you and me versus the problem. Unhealthy conflict is either the complete absence of it, so we're just avoiding the conversation together, or we're having the conversation, but it's you versus me. Unhealthy conflict is a game of singles tennis where we're competing against each other to see who's going to be the winner, who's right, who's wrong. And healthy conflict is a game of doubles, you against the problem, and you're working out together how to beat the problem and to find a solution. And it really is about getting it right rather than trying to be right. It's about creating an environment where everyone can tolerate and has the resilience for debate. And that requires a mindset of humility, of openness, of going into a conversation going, what can I learn that I don't already know that's going to inform better outcomes, better decisions? And maybe I don't learn anything, but 9 times out of 10, I'm probably going to learn something, because it's healthy conflict is based on the premise and a belief that multiple perspectives is a more intelligent way to go about problem solving and decision making than any one single perspective could ever possibly be. And that takes a mindset shift for some, because it's not a hierarchical mindset. It's we're all collecting different data, but actually it's a very, very logical mindset, because it's really about removing the individual and just really staying task focused. When you're delivering a difficult message, whether that's feedback or whether that's, to a client or whatever it is, you're having to say something hard. The best thing you can do is offer an observation, the impact of that observation that you perceive, because you're keeping it really, really task focused. Okay, so you're going to ask permission. When would be a good time to talk about the fees for the project, or our roles and responsibilities on this project? Because what I've observed last time is, for me, I didn't feel clear on what those roles were. And the impact of that was, I don't think I contributed as well as I could have done to the project, because I found myself holding back because I wasn't sure what my permissions were. I don't want that to happen again. We're going to speak from I, which is this piece around us personalizing it. Okay, so the worst thing we can do is bowl in and make judgmental accusations. Nobody likes to feel judged or told what they've done, who they are, and how they're feeling. Just at least try to get the first intro line right. Prep it beforehand and think, what's my opening line? So just sit down for 5 minutes and go, what's my opening sentence? And just think around permission, observation, impact. I think you can start by trying the permission trick, so giving them a manageable amount of permission so that they're choosing to, because especially if and when they say, no, actually, I don't want that feedback, it actually gives you then permission yourself to go, oh, that's interesting. When would you want feedback? And why don't you? And I'm super curious about this. So you can actually have the conversation that you would need to have more broadly. They're obviously making an assumption about how this feedback is not going to support something that is important to them or matters to them. But it is my belief that if you are working in a team together, you have got, I hope, some shared common goals that you're working towards. So this is not a disagreement of right and wrong. This is a disagreement of roadmap and what it's going to take to get you to achieve that common goal. And that's the conversation that you need to have. Honestly, for the most part, when you just start the conversation, a lot will come to the surface and you can address the right things that might get you to that place of being able to have the conversation. The other thing is, this is why it always comes back to team effectiveness, understanding what are the team rules of the road around what we can expect from each other when it comes to hard conversations, and what role do they have in this team as part of our growth and performance. The strongest relationships are those not that avoid conflict, but that navigate the conflict and that crucially know how to repair after the event. So they could actually handle conflict in a textbook sense quite poorly. But if they know how to repair, they're going to be all right, actually. So repair is a critical thing. So how do you do it? Good news is it doesn't require massive grand gestures. The simplest thing you can do is follow up as soon as you can within the day, within 24 hours, and say, that was a hard conversation. Thank you for engaging with it. Maybe you want to say, I don't think I was at my best. Maybe you want to say, feels like we need to carry on the conversation when we're ready. But what you want to do is basically say, that was hard and it continues to be hard, and we're not shying away from the problem, but you and I are okay. This is not about our relationship. This is about the task. And I want to signal to you that there's no need for you to feel kind of ostracized or kind of outcast. We just need to kind of bring them back into the circle as soon as possible. Ask them about their dog. Ask them how the meeting on Monday went. Show an interest in their project. Show willing to help them. There are gestures and words, affirmations, thank them for their contribution in a meeting. You just to have an awareness that for every negative interaction, we sort of need 4 to 5 positive interactions to rebalance the relationship.